occasionally, I would say there is a chess-like convergence in my thinking where I sort of see something coming down the bend and I go, that piece moves like an L and this piece moves diagonally. And if things keep, the only other options for this L piece to get where it's going ends up in the path of that diagonal thing. And everybody's like, that piece doesn't go like an L. It goes in a squirrely Q. It always has and it always will. And you go, no, it hasn't. It always goes in an L. No, I swear to God. And the thing that goes diagonally, that goes up and then it falls. And you're like, I don't, okay, maybe you guys know better than I do because you do this squiggly thing for a living. All right. But still, I get this feeling that I'm like, I don't know. I gotta call bullshit on some of this stuff. At some point, I gotta like, it sticks in my craw, and I start going, So in my studies, I've stumbled across a couple of things. And by the way, we will this kind of tease up. It's about the economic picture that goes on. These are three fellas. None of these are bad guys. It's a good way to start the show off, I think. You know, occasionally we're jumping into these clips, and almost everybody I show you is a complete prick right out of the gate. Not so much. Jeff Snyder and Emil Kalinowski have a regular show on Emil's channel where they talk. Snyder's from an investment capital market firm or something. And then they talk economics, macroeconomics and bond yields and shit like that. So when I was kind of doing a crash course, they were among like 10 people that I was kind of like, understand the bond market in 10 minutes, or here's a 3-hour course on fiat currencies, shit like that I've done over the years just to keep up with what the fuck, right? And Michael Green is the guy they introduce. He's a... I guess he's a professional. They regard him as a professional gentleman of capital market structures. Anyways, they're talking about whether or not we're in inflation. Now, this is long. I'm not going to do this whole video, but I want to bring you into just some thoughts and kind of introduce you to why I think the way I think on a bunch of these things, after kind of looking at the arguments on multiple sides. And this is just not something you're going to hear very often. So I'm not going to, I might do a little jumping around because, like I said, it's an hour-long thing, and I'm not going to do an hour of it. I just want to lead up into something else. So here you go. Wait, okay, here we go. And then we'll talk into here.
The idea to have him come join us. And I believe it's time for both of you to perform a mea culpa, admit to the world that you're wrong about consumer price increases, inflation. This will be a highly rated show as you guys admit the error of your ways. And what... By
the way, this is an ongoing joke that they're never going to get the kind of viewers they need because they're far too sensible. It's kind of related to that. And it's because of what they believe. People are like,
You did wrong, and what sort of penance you will pay. Jeff, Mike, who wants to go first?
I think, our tension here is that we've narrowed it down to the world's smallest circle of people who are not buying into the inflation idea that this is actual inflation and that there's some sort of meaningful distinction between consumer prices for other reasons and consumer prices of the old inflationary model.
Okay. You guys following this so far? Is that their argument is, we're not experiencing classic inflation, what people think of as inflation. What we're experiencing is supply shock, which is not caused by too much money in the system flowing willy-nilly and printing money and that idea. That's not, currently the situation. There may be times in history where that has been the cause of inflation, namely some of the big ones that didn't happen after a giant economic crash because of credit default swaps, and or times when there wasn't a pandemic a year and a half before. So, or an ongoing one, depending on how you feel about it.
I don't know, Mike. Is it just you and me left? Are there anybody else out there in the world after a year of relentless, hey, you guys, inflation's here. It's out of control. It's only getting worse.
Well, so I will tell you within my firm, my good friend Harley Bassman, who you and I chatted with, and his view is that we ganged up on him.
Yes.
Is constantly saying, Mike, when are you going to make the public apology? So the quick answer is there is no apology coming, right? Because I do think that we continue to be amongst the smallest group. There's a few others that I would toss in there. Alex Gurovich is a good friend of mine who feels somewhat similarly. Lacey Hunt,
Yes.
I think would identify in this.
These guys are talking about like economics people who don't buy into this sort of current Fed story that you're hearing everywhere in the media, right? Doesn't mean prices aren't going up. It's just saying the prices aren't going up because of inflation. They are going up because of supply shock.
Same camp. And I do think it's really important that we do acknowledge that what people perceived we were saying in terms of the transitory inflation, the transitory shift in prices, and really what we've seen is a shift in relative prices that is designed to facilitate the allocation of capital in one form or another, or reflect shortages, scarcity.
This is going to pay off, trust me.
Et cetera, that has emerged as the world has tried to reopen, that we acknowledge that the transitory phrase was misunderstood, and we probably should have done a better job of helping.
Okay, so what he's talking about, remember the whole talk about transitory inflation that was back in the summer when everybody's talking about. Here's why. The reason they're talking about inflation in terms of transitory nature is that inflation's always going up, like 2% every year, approximately. It's always going up. It's never coming back down. But there are artificial inflations, and then there are mechanical normal inflations, as opposed to like we're adding more technical workers to raise the quality of something, so our employees are more expensive, or we're getting a new additional feature of something, but the parts or the rare earth minerals used to make this piece of technological shit is brought in from a faraway place. So that's going to tick things up, and that's that 2% you see kind of all the time. Plus, real estate is always gaining ground, kind of slowly creeping up all the time. So that's always a part of your constant expenditure when you pay rent for an office building, or you buy office property, or you work out of your home, or any of that shit. Okay, so it tacks up by about 2% all the time. The difference is that these giant spikes in inflation that are artificial, caused by something else. A lot of times it's caused by money flowing into the system, is the idea, that this monetary inflation. Whereas what we're experiencing now is people can't get shit. All right, let's go. Yes, like your cable bill. Yes, always going up, but always adding features, smart menus, shit like that, tying it into your internet. Yeah.
People understand that, one, we were talking about a rate of inflation as compared to a price level per se, right? Because much of what is going on is we are being forced to restructure supply chains, recognizing that some elements of those supply chains have shifted irrevocably.
Right. So the supply chains are changing forever. This is the argument that's being made here. Now, I'm not asking you to take this, sight unseen or whatever, but people will know that I've made this argument many times. And it's just interesting to stumble across these three guys making this basically the same point. Because we are reshoring factories to the United States, which is a 5 to 10 year process. We are getting out of China. We have been getting cheap stuff, overtly cheap stuff, assembled in China, not made there, because a lot of, like, say, iPhones, the chips are made in Cupertino, the glass comes from someplace else, the circuit boards are made in South Korea. They're sent to China to be assembled in a clean room, and then they're boxed in the Czech Republic. That's how most of that's the supply chain for your iPhone. That's coming home. Now everybody's going, that's going to drive the price up because you have to have union workers here, or if you, even in Mexico, it's still going to be, there'll be trade and tariff issues back and forth between us and Mexico if you end up moving the factory there. That's true. However, it is not more expensive than, say, the worldwide death and destruction caused by the collapse of the worldwide economy in 2 years' time, caused by working that way in China for so long. Like that has to be factored into the cost. If you do that, the prices of shit are going to go down. If that's only if human life matters to you.
right? So China's involvement, Russia's involvement, the ability to ship stuff on a super efficient logistics system has certainly been damaged. It's unclear how much that will recover. And as a result, prices are going to have to be higher to encourage certain types of investment, certain types of restructuring of investment, of supply chains. But that's not actually inflation, right? Which is this generalized rise that is tied to monetary policy.
Right. That's the thing. Okay, I'm sorry. I interrupted Jeff. Hold
That's
on.
where, you know, that's Mike. That's where we always lose people, because once you get into distinctions, it's like, no, we don't care. Gasoline price, we're getting killed at the grocery store. So what do we care why we call it this or that? It's happening. Its prices are rising. And, you know, I try to make the argument all the time. Emil does. We get it in the comments section. We get it on Twitter. And it's really, what we're trying to tell you is that there is a difference, and it's not a meaningless difference. There's actually something serious going on here in terms of what it means about the future as well as the present.
Okay, so that's enough. I think you guys can get a grasp of the idea. Is that you're not getting killed, but that's what people are saying in terms of their feelings about inflated prices. And again, what happens when you have an artificial inflation, usually caused by like the manipulation of the oil market specifically, is you have a leap up and then a price crash. You have a deflation. You have deflationary pressure afterwards. So the big fear in the economy is not going to be like ongoing 20% Venezuela inflation like everybody's been bullshitting you into thinking. The problem actually, because if you're solving for the wrong cause, let's say you know you have a problem. You know you have a problem, but you disagree on the solution. If you pick the wrong solution, you will make the problem worse. Like you think your house is flooding because groundwater is rising, when in reality, a flood has already come. And the truth is, you're not drowning simply because your windows and doors are shut. But your solution is there's water gathering in the kitchen. Maybe if we open the door, it'll run out. When in reality, you're underwater. If you open the door, you'll drown. Does that make sense? It matters why. And with, you know, decisions the Fed is making and all those kind of things, it will affect how things are going. And the entire conversation, especially around the right wing, because they want to pin this on Biden, is about the idea that we have monetary inflation, that we're spending too much, that you plebes with your stupid stimulus checks and your bailouts from the government for your small business that couldn't operate for 10, 15 months, depending on when you could get workers back, if at all, that it's your fault, that saving you guys from COVID was a fundamental financial mistake, and you guys are fucking things up because you're priming the pump or you're flooding the engine. That's the idea. That's where the Kudlows of the world, the Trumps, the Hannitys, those guys, that's the story they're telling, that we have monetary inflation. And we fucking well don't. We have supply shock. That's it. Almost all of this is based on that concept. Good Lord, is that? Yeah, it is. Hold on. I have to close Telegram on the other thing because it made a noise. Eek. So again, all that eat the rich and kill the market and all that kind of stuff that people are saying there. You're lunatics. Quit it. That won't solve anything. and it isn't. You know, that's not the issue. So anyways, I'm just trying to catch you up on that. Okay, so which brings us to one of our favorite regular guests on the Thom Hartmann Show, Richard Wolff, drawn here as a character in, I think, a film strip on economics in 1971. And this is relatively new because they put recession 2022 question mark on his newspaper. Now I have a feeling this drawing's been around for a while, and they change this every so often with the typeface. Yes. So what? Yes, that's right, Mandy in Seattle. We are experiencing supply shock, not inflation. The prices are going up, but a price going up is not inflation. And the reason why prices go up, it specifically has the cause. You have to be aware of the proper cause, or you'll solve for the wrong problem and make shit worse. And solving it through monetary policy, either by raising interest rates or QE, it's going to create this back and forth wobble in the economy for no fucking reason, just because everybody's getting pressure. Jerome Powell and everyone is getting pressure from largely the right wing in the country, and a lot of people on the left who just don't fucking understand or think that's somebody else's business. I don't need to know. Right. Price gouging is part of it. Absolutely, Ginger. But that's because they either lost profits during the pandemic and are in danger of the company being sold, going under, blah, blah, blah. There's that part. Or they're trying to do buybacks on a bigger scale. There's a lot of reasons. But none of it has to do with the printing of money. None of it has to do with some bullshit idea that they're flooding the money with the country with cash. It has a lot to do with it has nothing to do with the bailout, the rescue package, shit like that, or the support of people during COVID. It's nonsense. That's why the economy is recovering as well as it is. All we're feeling is literally based on supply shock and the fact that we relied on a supply chain that was stretched all over the fucking world for a long time, and now it's collapsed.
This is Richard Wolff from Democracy at Work with another Wolff Responds.
It's a little severe, dude.
I'd like to speak with you today about U.S. capitalism, the condition of the U.S. economy right now.
Which is apparently controls the world with a series of space satellites made out of snowflakes.
I think it's at a crucial point. I think big changes are coming.
Also, Democracy at Work's logo looks a lot like the Dow. I'm just saying.
I think it deserves way more attention than it is getting, particularly from the perspective I would like to offer now.
Okay,
We are coming off 2.5 years almost now.
Almost.
Of one of the worst periods in the history of U.S. capitalism. We suffered at the same time a major public health disaster, COVID-19.
We did? You're not going to tell me that played a major part in this. Nah, it's all monetary.
And the second worst collapse of our economic system since the Great Depression.
No, it didn't collapse. I mean, it definitely went down and required jump starting, I would say, or maintenance, but it didn't collapse. If it collapsed, it would no longer be. Never mind.
Of the 1930s. 2020 and 2021 were the combined experience of that. More than half of our labor force suffered unemployment for some period of that time.
Yes, which had nothing to do with economics at all and entirely to do with a fucking rampant disease.
Losses of jobs, losses of self-esteem, losses of homes.
Okay, government stepped in, largely put together eviction moratoriums and rent support even for businesses to stay in buildings that were effectively empty for months at a time. Self-esteem, I can't help you with. By the way, if you caught COVID or you feel shitty that you didn't, or did, or feel bad you lost a job or emotionally felt distraught because there was a pandemic, and you're like, I don't know, I'm questioning myself as a worker. You're kind of a lunatic.
Losses of income and losses of a sense of a future.
Yeah, only the people on ventilators.
All of those over 2 years plus, devastating.
Well, no, obviously, because you're making YouTube videos and you're putting them out, and so am I. And people have had it rough because it's a pandemic, but we're not devastated. Meanwhile, at the making of this video, there are mass graves being uncovered in Ukraine. That's what I would call devastation.
But then this capitalist system went one further step.
Oh, you bastard.
It hit this country with an unconscionable inflation.
Huh? It hit this system with an unconscionable inflation.
As if the other 2 years weren't worse enough, capitalism is showing us what it is capable of. Prices are rising 8 to 10% a year on average.
Year over year.
Wages are not keeping up, not even close.
Yeah, but the inflation is temporary because it's based on supply shock, not monetary supply. Geez, if only we had an economics professor around who would know these things.
Therefore, the inequality, which got worse through the pandemic and the crash.
No, technically it didn't. I mean, if you're only counting the fact that Amazon bloomed and all the delivery services and the mail companies like eBay and Walmart.com, those definitely ballooned during this time. And small businesses collapsed because they were bars and restaurants, places people couldn't go. That's not indicative of inequality. That's indicative of the functionality of those businesses during a temporary pandemic.
It's getting still worse through the inflation. And now the final step, which provoked this video.
Uh-oh.
Major banks in this country are telling us that because of the devastating inflation and all the economic damage it is causing, on top of everything else.
Yeah, on top of the COVID that it caused.
The government is going to step in to try to stop or slow the inflation by raising interest rates. It's already begun. May and June are scheduled to be big further increases.
Quarter points.
And at least 3 banks, Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, and the Bank of America, have now predicted a recession at the end of this year.
That's because they're pushing back against the rise in interest rates, because that's how you stop inflation. Traditionally, when it's monetary inflation, you trigger a mild recession. That's what does it. That recession removes money from the supply. The problem is that's not what's causing this. The Fed is recognizing this. The banks are arguing against it.
Or early next year as a consequence of rising interest rates.
Or the fact that we've gone through a giant pandemic and we're having to reshore almost every industry.
It's too much.
Oh, no.
These kinds of repeated blows to the working class of this country, the vast majority of people who don't own significant amounts of stock, who depend on their jobs.
Yes, if you have a Robinhood account, you're insignificant as a stockholder. If you meme stock game stoppers, got to knock it off.
For the incomes they and their families need. We are now saying to them, you really don't matter. And they're angry.
We are? I'm sorry, my mouse clicks are loud. I apologize. Are we that? Are we? Did we send out the newsletter telling people that they're worthless and they're angry?
And they're bitter. And the social conflicts and divisions.
Racism, white America's most dangerous socially transmitted disease. Okay, okay. That guy seems to be more concerned with racial politics and the idea that of racial injustice, and good on him for it. Maybe, I don't know. Is this a picture of him? Was he fired from his anti-racism job? And did somebody tell him he's worthless on his way out the door?
And angers and rages are getting worse by the hour.
No, they're not.
What's going on is a failure of an economic system made worse by the inability or the refusal of those in power to admit it and to face it and to deal with it.
Admit what? Deal with it. Jesus Christ.
No. From President Biden on down, we're in an economic recovery.
We are.
The horror of that claim was made clear in recent days with the results of the University of Michigan Consumer Survey.
Please, God, save me from Marxists who are using consumer surveys to dictate how the economy is actually going.
Which clearly showed that record low percentages of the American people think we're in good economic times, and even more extreme lows never seen before in what folks expect in the way of the economic future we face.
Yeah, it's almost like all the news they've gotten is bullshit.
No, we're not in a recovery, and saying so doesn't make it so.
Well, I mean, we technically are. I mean, we had 6.7% unemployment, for example, and now we have 3.6%. Wages are going up. Again, the supply shock inflation is different than monetary inflation. And it's not anything that anybody can do anything about except deal with the material world as it is. The lack of realism, and Leon's getting larger.
This is a failed system, and the sooner we face it...
By the way, he's doing this video from New York, I believe.
And talk about it.
Not Canada.
And begin to deal with the changes needed to get out of this downward spiral, the better off we all will be.
Like what? You're an economics professor. You've got 43 seconds left. Give it to me, big boy.
If discussions like this strike you as needing to be part of the popular conversation...
This isn't a discussion. This is a rhetorical blather.
...about where we are...
Where are you?
...then please partner with us.
No, I'm not going to do that. This is a sales pitch. Motherfucker. This is like... It's all Glenn Beck. At the end of the day, they're all selling me prepper food. Can I explain supply shock? Yes, Scott Peterson. So supply shock is when you had an ongoing availability of goods. Say the closest thing most people experience would be wheat blight or a frost that lowers the amount of available oranges, for example. So a supply shock would be year after year after year after year, we have oranges, 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 oranges. And then one year there's a huge weird winter storm that wipes out all the oranges. And so everything related to that, from orange juice to fresh oranges to orange flavoring to whatever the fuck they do with the peels to make pigment for stuff, all of that stuff falls off a cliff, right? And so the prices jack up temporarily, but that doesn't stay permanent because the next year or 2 years later, there'll be a recovery and the normal amount of oranges will still be back in the market. Does that make sense? It's not because all of a sudden there was a law against producing oranges and you just can't get them anymore, and now they're a specialty item that only the super rich can afford. It's because there was a direct impact on that crop that year. Does that make sense? I did finally find the oranges of the oranges, everybody. Right? Do you like movies about gladiators? It does have that kind of a vibe. Yeah, no problem, Scott. So again, you wouldn't say that the year after oranges, the price of oranges went up because there was a frost, that the price of oranges has hit an inflation marker that it's going to stay at. Nobody would get away with charging the same amount for oranges 2 years later. If they did, they'd be left with a lot of rotten oranges because people would just go, fuck you, I don't need oranges anymore. I've moved on. I'm eating mangoes now. They're cheaper. And, you know, I'm not going to pay you like they're rare if they're falling off the goddamn trees. That's why, by the way, oil, the last time it spiked at $143 a barrel, dropped to $35 a barrel within 7 months. And again, the gas prices went up when that happened, but it wasn't inflation. Because if it was inflation, that would have stuck. Inflation is that 2% plus that happens all the time. And it slowly over the years raises prices. That's why, $1 in 1970 buys you would cost you whatever you could buy with $1 in 1970 would cost you $7.17 now because of that 2% upon 2% upon 2% upon 2%. Does that make sense? Yes, and oil prices are highly manipulated, and therefore it's one of the reasons why they don't add them to the CPI sometimes. When Glenn Beck is bitching all the time about how these fuckers, they don't include, he doesn't swear, I do, but he's like, they don't include energy, or they exclude energy from their measurement of inflation. Well, there's a reason why they do that, because it's a highly manipulated number. It's not based on steady climb. Sometimes the Saudis produce a lot and glut the market in a fight with the Russians like they did while Trump was in office, and then he goes over and talks everybody into slowing production, into a contract, by the way, that ends this month. Trump made a deal with the Saudis and the Russians that we would lower our output, that Mexico would lower their output, and we were paying Mexico to continue to lower their output. And that deal ends this month. So anyways, oil is 40% higher than told. What do you mean? Just in overall cost? Well, we pay different prices depending on where we're getting it from too. And also our oil and gas is extracted with more environmental care than, say, the oil and gas in Russia, for sure. It's on par with the coal that's taken out of the ground in China versus the coal, by the way, that's taken out of the ground in Australia. Man. Anyways, that you get my point. Meanwhile, this motherfucker is going to sell us something at the end, isn't he?
Share this video.
Why? What did I learn? What was I supposed to get from this? Like, I love Tom Hartman, but he has this fucker on all the time, and I have yet to see him be right about anything.
Video. Friends, family, co-workers.
Yes, that's what the right wing tells me to do too with their videos at the end.
However you can.
I'm going to scroll it on. I'm going to write everything down on parchment. I'm going to wad it up and stick it in my rectum and poop it into the mouth of a dear friend who needs to learn macroeconomics.
It's a way for us together to extend the reach of bringing some sanity to the economic crisis building around us.
No, the assertion that there's an economic crisis, or that the crisis you're asserting exists for the reasons that you are asserting it. There is no difference, ladies and gentlemen, between the argument that Prof. Wolff here is making and the argument that Larry Kudlow is making. It's the same bullshit with the same remedy. Ugh. God. So anyways, thanks CSL for popping a little Richard Wolff into my regular, hold on, is this working? Yeah, it's working now. Into my my little secret envelope of videos that I go through. Thanks, Fish Delight. I used to think this guy was cool because of Tom, but hearing him get all worked up and then pass the hat around makes me feel like a fool forever liking it. Well, that's exactly the issue. Look, I don't care. Here's the thing. To some degree, if you're a Marxist, communist, socialist, and that's your true belief and all that kind of, knock yourself the fuck out. But don't lie to me, that you are, because that dude's got that guy's got a 401k that could choke Elon Musk's cyber horse. Secondly, everything about his show is capitalism. Ugh. And then ultimately in the end, don't give financial advice effectively about an economy that won't work and will hurt more people. Jesus.